Over the last 10 years, central banks around the world have been net buyers of gold, as we can see in this chart. Yet they insist that gold is not money. So what is going on? Today we take a look at what just may have been the biggest story in global finance over the last 10 years. It's the story of China and Russia's growing gold reserves and what this means as the global economy enters a new financial crisis. After all, as the saying goes, he who has the gold makes the rules. So let's dive on in. Now, this channel is all about economic and financial literacy to allow you to thrive in a world of crazed central banks, big governments, and an economic system which is out of control. Now, a recent video on the BBC News page looked inside the Bank of England gold vaults and identified that the Bank of England has over £200 billion worth of gold. Let's just take a quick look at this. Unfortunately, what was not pointed out is that much of this gold does not actually belong to the UK. In fact, if we look at the UK's holdings, we can see that we have just 300 tons of gold. This is currently worth about £11.7 billion. In fact, ex-Chancellor Gordon Brown sold over half of the UK's gold between 1999 and 2002, when gold was as low as $250 an ounce. This period subsequently became known as Brown's bottom. So why does this all matter? Well, if we look at world gold reserves, we can see that the UK does not even appear in the top 10. In fact, we come in about 17th place. We can see that the US is at the top with over 8,000 tons of gold, yet US gold has not been audited since back in the 1950s. For over 5,000 years, gold has been used and is seen as a form of money and positive store of value. Until 1971, we had a gold standard in operation. This meant that the US Federal Reserve could only print $35 or so for every ounce of gold that they held in reserve. Yet this was abandoned temporarily in 1971. The temptation to create more money, governments used deficit spending, and fund wars was just too great. Since 2008, the money supply has increased enormously through the central bank's policy of quantitative easing. After the 2008 financial crisis, gold hit a record high in 2011 of $1,900 an ounce. Since then, there has been a critical focus upon gold for central banks of middle-income countries around the world. Indeed, we see that the central banks are the net buyers of gold, meaning that they are buying more than they are actually selling. Most gold producers, such as Australia or South Africa, export their gold, as we can actually see in these export matrices, firstly for Australia and secondly for South Africa. This is a key source of export revenue for these countries. Yet over the last 10 years, China has been producing almost 15% of global gold production at somewhere between 400 to 450 tons per year. But in China's authoritarian economy, there is a ban on the export of domestically produced gold. What's more is that China has been the world's largest importer of gold since 2014. Although precise figures are actually difficult to determine, some analysts actually believe this amounts to over 12,000 tons of gold since 2008. With help from their international investments and their Belt and Road Initiative, China is now mining gold beyond its own borders. Some analysts believe that China's overseas gold production will soon exceed the volume of its domestic production operations. Previously, China was the biggest holder of US Treasury bills. Buying these dollar-based assets helped keep the renminbi exchange rate low, and this was good for their export competitiveness, much to Donald Trump's annoyance. But they are slowly selling these dollar-based assets and exchanging them for gold. But the World Gold Council tells us that China holds just short of 2,000 tons of gold reserves. This clearly does not add up with the figures we've seen previously. At the same time, Russia has increased their gold reserves from 400 tons in 2008 to almost 2,250 tons by the end of 2019. Meanwhile, they've de-dollarized their economy and now run a balanced fiscal budget, in contrast to Western democracies. Moreover, Russia's national debt, its government debt, is much lower as a percentage of GDP than other countries such as the UK and the US. And then there's India, and it has almost doubled its gold reserves over the same period and is actively developing mines with enormous potential domestically. But if we take a look at the gold reserves in France, the UK, Switzerland, we see enormous declines in gold reserves. These declines are reinforced by the fact that the US private investment in gold has fallen from 7% of personal investments back in 1980 to somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2% today. But in 1980, Chinese and Indian investments in gold amounted to 10%. This has now risen to around 53% today. In fact, China's central bank has actively been promoting physical gold ownership of its citizens in a program known as the People's Gold. In 2012, President of the China Gold Association, Sun Zhuhao, wrote for the Chinese Communist Party that because gold possesses stable intrinsic value, it is both the cornerstone of a country's currency and credit as well as a global strategic reserve. Without exception, world economic powers establish gold strategies at the national level. The state will need to elevate gold to an equal strategic resource as oil and energy. In addition, because individual investment demand is an important component of China's gold reserve system, we should encourage individual investment demand for gold. Practice shows that gold possession by citizens is an effective supplement to national reserves and is very important to national financial security. We should advocate to store gold among the people and guide a healthy, positive development in this segment. This is the objective under our gold strategy. He goes on to say that the world economy faces new challenges and new opportunities. Therefore, we must relook the status and function of gold from a strategic height and create and implement a national gold strategy to strengthen our country's ability to counter complex situations. Complex situations maybe like the one we're facing right now. Most analysts believe that the People's Bank of China holds double the amount of reserves that they have actually declared. Then there's the Chinese equivalent sovereign wealth fund, the China Investment Corporation, and the military holdings, which are also undeclared. In total, Nick Laird of Gold Charts R Us believes that China has around 25,318 tons of gold publicly and privately held. Numerous other analysts believe that this is the right sort of ballpark figure. It's believed that around 40 to 50% of that vast gold holding is held by the Chinese state. So why has China not actually wanted to declare its gold reserves? Well, there's at least 4 reasons here. Firstly, it would cause the renminbi to actually appreciate in value, leading to less competitive exports. China's dollar-based assets would also depreciate in value. It would also be a direct challenge to the United States and would send the gold price soaring at a time where China has actually continued to accumulate gold. When we consider this whole situation and the alternative approach that has been used in the West, which is all about debt-fueled money printing, it really seems as if the West has been playing whack-a-mole while the Chinese and the Russians are playing chess. This whole story really reflects the movement of wealth from the developed world to the rapidly developing middle-income countries. It is these countries that have got their poker chips stacked up, they've got their seat at the table, and they're ready to play. These countries are now going to play a very significant role when it comes to actually determining the new monetary system that comes out of any likely financial crisis that we now face. For private investors, it seems running a personal gold standard is an effective strategy to benefit from this whole situation. Jim Rickards recommends 10% of investable assets in gold. Chris Cole, who studied asset performance over a 100-year period, advocates 20% of investable assets. Do check out these other videos that we've got on either side of me here, and let me know what you think about this whole situation in the comments below. But I'll see you next time. Bye bye.